Welcome to Night Shadows. I'm Stuart Best, where the paranormal is normal, where that which you thought you knew, you didn't, and where the future can be known if you know exactly where to look.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for tuning in and listening. We have our usual, I guess it's usual for Wednesday to do an update. We have Larry Taylor, the news gatherer, on board and on top of his mountain. Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hey, Stuart. I just looked at my office today where I work, and I am overcome with data. I've got stacks everywhere of news.
I know how that goes. I don't think people realize how much stuff you have to go through to narrow down and get rid of news that really doesn't mean a whole lot. Why don't we start with not Irma, but Jose? And now they say something. Have you heard about this? That Maria might catch up with Jose?
I've been hearing some reports. Yeah, I've been hearing some scattered reports that are indicating that Jose is moving again back towards the coast, towards D.C. or that area, very slowly as a tropical storm. And they are talking about Marie. If she continues on, she may join it.
Well, that would indicate weather warfare for sure, I think. And so far, I guess, is Puerto Rico now out of power and nobody can reach her? That's the latest I heard. Have you heard that?
The latest I've heard, Stuart, is from One American News and also Fox, indicating that Marie hit Puerto Rico dead on as a Category 4 hurricane and is now degraded to a Category 2 because of the destruction. But they say it's devastated in Puerto Rico, and they can't raise anyone. All communications pretty much are with those islands, and that region is out right now.
Well, it sounds like the world is getting pounded. And we had that earthquake down there in Mexico, and now I hear that they, from Dutch Sense, who does an awful lot of the research on these things, is saying it appears that these quakes are going to be moving north, and that kind of indicates California next.
Yeah,
so maybe the warnings about California aren't that far off.
Well, no, they're not that far off, because since the 7.1 earthquake in Mexico City, that they're finding more and more problems there. They're finding more dead and a lot of people missing and collapsed buildings everywhere. They say, I'm hearing reports that volcano also has gone off now. And it appears that the earthquake activity is beginning to move up into California. So we've got to watch that closely.
And how about the earthquakes in Idaho and down in Yellowstone? Are they still continuing insofar as we can find out? I did get an email from someone who knows someone right around the Yellowstone, and I think I reported it on the last show. But the ground is rising and sinking where they lived, and so they moved, sold it to somebody else, who evidently doesn't seem to care if the ground rises 3 or 4 feet and then sinks 3 or 4 feet. But that would be kind of an indication that there's an awful lot of activity in and around Yellowstone that no one is paying much attention to.
Well, that's true. We're getting those reports, and also, interestingly, we don't know where to actually put the blame, but there appears to be an exodus going on out of California. There's a lot of people moving from California to Texas. Of course, I don't imagine they're moving to Houston, but they're moving to other parts of Texas. Yeah, in that region, and a lot of that, the interviews I've heard today indicate that coming geophysical situations coming in that region is causing people to go ahead and move out of that region, and at the same time, have voted now to be a sanctuary state. And Lou Dobbs posted today that it appears that secession from a Trump administration is clearly on the way in California. I suppose I can say one thing: when they no longer wave the American flag, California will either fly under China's flag or Russia's.
Yes. Yeah, you remember that Russian scientist who, I don't know if you could call it a prophecy, but he was just, I assume, just running on what he had read, heard, researched, that he thought America would be broken up into 3 or 4 regions, which is sort of what, Jeremiah the prophet talks about. Ruler against ruler and fights against the governors and the feds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe we should talk when we get into it. Trump's comments in the UN were kind of interesting because he wove in peace and security twice very cleverly, but usually talked about peace and prosperity. And tomorrow, as you know, is the International Day of Peace. And of course, if you go to the UN site and you type in peace and security, which is what the Bible says they'll say just before the end comes, it's loaded with documents about peace and security. I think they were very cleverly hedging when they do that, because there's an awful lot of people now that are waking up to what's actually going on. And, of course, the Bible's warning about when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction cometh upon them. And with the UN saying peace and safety on tomorrow, the International Peace Day, and Trump, was it yesterday, making that speech, weaving that in there. You got the world leaders. And a friend of mine in California actually sent me down a video. I could hardly believe what I was hearing, but it was about Israel. And almost every nation speaker or representative of that nation uttered the words peace and security. Every one of them. So we've come virtually to the point where now if the UN is issuing their International Peace Day, and part of their headline is peace, and then they put another word in there, and then they use security. So the world representative is saying peace and security, basically. And that's when the Lord says sudden destruction cometh. And it's odd that they're saying it at the same time that Israel is entering 2018 on the Feast of Trumpets. I really don't think they're going to see the new moon tonight, but maybe they will, or maybe they already have. How far are we ahead of them? 7-8 hours? We're behind them, I think.
Yeah,
but I haven't heard if they spotted the moon or not.
Yeah, they're ahead of us about 8 or 9 hours, something like that, I believe. I have not heard myself. I've been watching, and I did look up DEGPA file today, and they were, of course, posting Happy New Year 5778. So I don't know. I hadn't heard officially yet.
Well, there's two things going on there, and that happened back in 2015 when everybody thought, including the world leaders, that was it. Time was up. World's going to enter into a time of cleansing, I guess you could call it from their point of view. But they didn't cite the new moon, as you know, for 2 days. Now, secular Israel, or the Illuminati Israel that runs it, basically, said that they were going to celebrate on the official day of the secular calendar. And I think they're doing it right now, which is why Netanyahu spoke yesterday but won't today, because the 20th to them is the beginning of the Feast of Trumpets. But from the biblical point of view, it may not come until either the 21st or the 22nd. This is going to be very, very interesting to watch, because I think the Lord is going to move, if he's going to move, on the biblical calendar and not the secular one. What do you think? I would think that would be his point of view.
Well, I've had some experiences where, prayer time and other things where I did note that it appeared, the Creator was following his calendar. However, I'm kind of intrigued, Stuart, with your recent notice about, is there possibly two calendars operating on planet Earth right here at the end of the age of the Gentiles, so to speak, or the church age, and the beginning of the millennium? Is there two calendars operating?
Well, yeah, I think there could be, and of course, if we could go right through this and really not anything happen that would be visible, be more in the spiritual realm. But the odds are against that. There is just more and more and more. It's like the Lord is saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. Time's up, time's up, time's up. There was a guy on YouTube who presented more proof about the star sign. It was kind of complicated astronomically, but he's absolutely right. This is a very, very special sign. The only thing we don't know is exactly what it means. I think it means for sure that the occult believes that the arrival is either on that date or very close to it. And that might mean that part of the church goes or all the church goes. I don't know. I'll put it this way. If nothing happens, those that are in the gainsayers, they're going to have a heyday. But I think, that part of the confirmation that this may actually be a time of the removal of the church in the next couple, 3-4 days is one of the negative confirmations is all the big boys in the prophetic circles coming out and saying absolutely nothing is going to happen, and it's an embarrassment, they claim, for the church. It's an embarrassment to the world that these idiots are out there claiming what they're claiming. Of course, none of them are claiming it's the end of the world. So this is going to get very, very interesting as we go into it. And that 9/23 date, they're still at it. In the movies, they're still at it, and there's got to be a reason for it. Why would they spend so much money on this date? And you may remember when the Queen said in 2014 that was the last Christmas.
Yeah.
And I think the Pope said the same thing. And then all of a sudden the Lord throws a monkey wrench into it and says, well, maybe not. Let's have Trump come up. Let's see what happens when we put him in office. And delayed it for 2 years. We might have a delay of 1 year. It's interesting that the Feast of Trumpets in 2018 falls on 9/10 and ends on 9/11. And we've seen 9/11 for a long time. So this is all fascinating to me. It's exciting, too. But anyway, what's going on with Kimmy the Rocket Man, other than threats?
Yeah, he's been rather threatening the last few days, especially since Trump's UN speech. And, of course, that speech was followed by Benjamin Netanyahu in the evening, which I was shocked because Fox didn't even carry that speech. They blacked out Netanyahu's speech. And basically, though, I can tell people I did hear him on C-SPAN, because that appeared to be the only news service covering Netanyahu at the UN. There's been some, simple cuts, but basically Trump really hammered, if you want to call him Rocket Man, I don't mind, and also North Korea, but he also hammered Iran, and Netanyahu's speech just backed him up, basically, and really zeroed in on Iran. And so, matter of fact, Stuart, as I listened to those, it almost sounded like a declaration of war What do you think?
That's what I thought, that we were being put on notice. Get ready. Interesting, the date, because if the 9/23 date, if you followed any of the movies, was a time of trouble begins, a whole series of bad things, like a domino. You know, you have one fall, like North Korea, we get into a war, that makes another domino fall and another domino fall. We do have Daniel chapter 8. We have not Revelation, but Isaiah chapter 17 war. And then we have Ezekiel 38:39, which brings Russia into the conflict. So I agree with you. It sounded like Trump was declaring war on both North Korea and Iran. Now, North Korea, I got an article here. It says North Korea has warned that more sanctions and pressure will only make it accelerate its nuclear program. Called the new set of UN sanctions the most vicious, unethical, and inhumane act of hostility. So that doesn't sound like Kimmy Boy is going to be affected much by any of this. He's just going to increase his work. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's going to just increase, and I think they expect him to. Now, what was interesting also was, during the UN speech, there was an inauguration going on in Israel of a new United States Air Force military base in Israel. And what's interesting also, I know it hadn't made the news yet, particularly other than One American News and a little bit on Fox, is the fact that since the speech yesterday, the U.S., a number of U.S. companies are now under cyber attack from Iran.
Well, that's also kind of an act of war. Now, I had read an article. It's interesting that they're coming public now with the U.S. military base. I had read an article maybe 4, maybe 5, 6 years ago that we had a secret underground base in Israel and that nobody knew about it. So maybe they're just going public with something that's already there. I don't know. How do you know? I mean, it's kind of like those articles we saw where Iran had detonated several nukes a long time ago. That was, 10, 12 years ago that they made mention of that? You remember that?
Well, that's very true. And at the same time, Stuart, I also had seen the reports of underground American base in Israel. But this one is publicly observed. You know, it's right there on the surface. U.S. Air Force planes and missiles, et cetera, in southern Israel. And, I can't say it's the same base, but they're basically, right out in the open now about it. And I'm not too sure that they aren't expecting something out of North Korea and Iran, and they're preparing for it, and the defense of Israel possibly.
Well, I think there is a close, maybe we should talk about the Bible codes, Glazerson and the other older gentlemen over there, the rabbis, that were going public quite frequently with all these Bible codes about Messiah, et cetera, et cetera. Then all of a sudden, nothing. Absolute silence. Almost like they discovered something, as we have talked about, that maybe they just don't want to talk about. So maybe they do know from the codes that an attack is absolutely imminent, and if the 9/23 date that everybody's pointing to is a big change date or pivot point, why we could start to see, bad warfare. Let's put it that way, nuclear warfare. And North Korea said of the new UN sanctions that were approved, by the way, on 9/11, was to physically exterminate the country's people, system, and government. Isn't that what Trump said at the UN? We will destroy North Korea?
Yeah, I would take it to mean, I think Kim got the message, if that's what Kim's saying, that the threat is against them, because complete destruction pretty much takes that all in.
Yeah, so are they trying to, how do I word this? Are they trying to nudge Kim into a precursor attack or first strike? It almost sounds like they are. And remember, Dr. Doom said that Kim would be the first to use a UN nuke. And that Rabbi some time ago prophesied that it was North Korea that was going to start all this. And there were other prophecies that said that World War III would start in an area not thought of. So that might be exactly what we're going to see. And maybe that's what they're planning. Maybe they're planning on a nuclear strike on or slightly after 9/23. As far as this thing can go, I think it could go all the way to the end of September. In fact, there's a song that says, "Wake me up at the end of September." So it makes you wonder what they are planning or what they know. And then we got a video from where the Queen and I think it was Harry that were talking. And he lifts his hand and he goes, boom. And you remember the ads? Bada book, bada boom. So we did some research on it. And basically it kind of indicates destruction. So I don't know.
We're seeing that bada book, bada boom advertisement right now on TV every few hours. I hear that guy saying that, and I didn't really know what that all meant, but that's
it's very, very interesting what it means, and people really should look it up. You go on the internet and look up bada and look up boom and all of that, and basically it's a terminology, and it's very odd they're using it because it's gibberish. I mean, what would you think somebody came up to you and said bada book, bada boom? You'd probably look at him and tell him to leave because you'd think he was insane. When you see stuff like that, they're telling people something. And I guess that's the conspiratorial mind working overtime. But, yeah, people should look it up. It's very, very interesting. Okay, North Korea threatens U.S. and Trump with a horrible nuclear strike and a miserable final ruin. Trump some time ago said, he crosses the red line, he does this again, we're going to go get him. But he's not doing anything. And I guess the question is, why isn't he?
Well, that's a little bit why I'm mystified. I can't figure that out. But what's interesting is right after the UN speech, North Korea, as you just noted, made specific threats against the U.S., and after Netanyahu's UN speech today, Iran, I don't know if you knew about it, but Iran now has put out a threat that they are going to reduce Tel Aviv and one of the other cities, I can't remember which one it is in Israel, to dust.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Iran said that?
Yeah. So, and at the same time, Iran right now is cyber attacking our firms, our companies over here in the U.S. So, I mean, if you call that an act of war, we're really at war with both of them, in a way of speaking.
Yeah, it's just got to go hot. Here's a little headline. FEMA, nationwide test of the emergency alert system on September 27th, which is a 9/9 at 2:20, which is an 11:11 Eastern Daylight Time. There will be a nationwide test of the emergency alert system. It will be broadcast everywhere in the United States across radio stations, broadcast television, cable, wireline, satellite service providers, and all digital radio. What do you think of that? With what you already know from the meetings you've seen or heard about or been at.
We're already that's already happening in the ham world right now. Last week, got a text from the center here locally, and they were testing all the ham units in emergency preparedness mode, and indicating that more tests were coming. So they're beginning to operate the system, I think, which indicates we may be approaching a certain date where something happens.
Yeah, I do believe it. And by the way, before I forget, tomorrow on Night Shadows, and I'm not sure the time yet, but I'm alerting everybody to check the website, and we're going to have Stan Dale on tomorrow evening, and I'm not sure exactly what time it is yet. I got to straighten that one out. But by all means, tune in and listen, because Stan's done a lot of research on a lot of this stuff, and he knows an awful lot of things about what's going on. So Larry will be joining me and Stan, and I just hope everybody will listen. And what else should we talk about before we close out?
Well,
here's one.
The Drudge had. Yeah, I was just going to mention Drudge today. Basically, Maria direct hit in the Caribbean islands, lights out in the Caribbean all across. Hurricane Maria strikes Puerto Rico, no contact, entirely all power, comms down, and the track is indicating it's moving towards the U.S., so we've got to watch and see if it recharges.
Yeah, here's another headline. Beware of space hurricanes. Astronomers warn small fluctuations in solar wind cause huge storms that threaten Earth's satellites. Space hurricanes form a plasma sweep across the Earth's magnetic field. This creates massive vortices along the boundary, and study found that fluctuations in solar wind can affect their speed and strength, and as McKinney says, they are part of what makes hurricanes. And so it makes you wonder. We know space weather is part of this. And let me close down with this one, Larry. Here's a good one for you. How a 5-year-old's pretend play resulted in a school suspension. He was labeled a terrorist. 5 years old. We're
Welcome
insane.
to America. Welcome to America.
I think the whole system is slowly, well, I'm not so sure it's so slowly going insane. Anyway, thanks a lot, Larry, for coming on. And don't forget to check, and we'll make sure we got the time right. But Larry and I will be talking with Stan Dale, who is a scientist who people need to listen to. And any last comment, Larry?
Well, Ed Dames also sent out a post today warning about all communications going down. So maybe they're testing because of the sun.
I'll bet you. We did have that precursor series of CMEs that he called the kill shot. So that was probably just a, precursor event to what's coming. Wow. Yeah, if we have a massive EMP, we're all going down. Anyway, thanks a lot, folks. Thanks a lot, Larry. And please check. We'll alert everybody as to when that show is going to be tomorrow night. Anyway, good night.